Now, with thousands expected to join the Muslim tolerance rally today, last night's Pegida marches in Germany's eastern city of Dresden reached their highest figures yet, as 25,000 protesters attended. But it seems the movement is inspiring another right-wingers elsewhere in Europe. In Norway, more than 100 protesters attended anti-immigration marches in Oslo, organised by a group who called themselves the Pegida Norway. But in Germany, they were heavily outnumbered by counter-protests that brought tens of thousands onto the streets across the country. There were reports of 30,000 counter-protests in the city of Leipzig alone, and another 20,000 in Munich. More details in this report.
Dresden, another Pegida march and 25,000 in attendance. A surge in popularity for the anti-Islamic protest movement that has shocked the political establishment. Dressed in black, many came in respect for the 17 people killed in the French capital last week. Some holding banners like this one, warning last week it was Paris, tomorrow it'll be the whole of Europe. And now there are fears that last week's attacks in Paris have crystallized the cause of the protest movement. What began as a movement against plans for a new asylum seekers shelter has now become a vehicle for airing the disapproval of the changing face of Europe. But that's not all. Some of these protesters are now calling for a Europe free of non-Christians. The protesters here have defied calls by politicians to stay away. For her part, German Chancellor Angela Merkel said the marches are organised by people with hatred in their hearts. But public tensions have been fuelled by recent events in Paris and closer to home. Days ago, an arson attack on a newspaper office in Hamburg, which republished pictures first printed by Charlie Hebdo in 2006. But these sentiments are not being felt by all. Pegida rallies were heavily outnumbered by counter-demonstrations across Germany. There were reports of 30,000 counter-protests in the city of Leipzig alone and another 20,000 in Munich. Holding a broom, the symbolic gesture to sweep away hatred, separation and intolerance. A reminder that Germany does not speak for all Germans, and their message was clear.
The only thing I want is for all the Pegida demonstrators to really reflect on what they are constantly hearing, and that would be my only plea to everybody participating. No hatred or anything, but simply to think it through.
Kein Hass oder so, aber einfach mal nachdenken.
Ja, die tragen ja die französische Flagge hier rum.
They are carrying the French flags here. They feel themselves to be the preservers of the Christian West. They are certainly no Christians at all. Or hopefully not. But obviously the Muslim extremists haven't done themselves any favors, but there is nothing we can do about it.
Aber kann man ja nichts machen.
While politicians are discouraging the attendance of Pegida rallies, the recent events in Paris look likely to provide more ammunition for the anti-Islam movement in Germany and possibly across Europe.
Now, joining us via Skype is co-founder of the Islamic Human Rights Commission, Arzu Merali. Thank you for joining us today, Arzu. Now, Pegida marches are gaining momentum across Germany. Is Islamization the only threat here, or is there more to it?
Well, Islamization is, I think, as we all know, as Muslims in Europe, a kind of fiction, figment of the imagination of not just the far right, sadly, but all sorts of different sectors of society. And ultimately what we're seeing here is a swing towards the right that's really fostered by unabated demonization from the mainstream. So in a way, even people who are going to Pegida rallies are sort of victims of this because they're being incited by what they're hearing on the media, what, unrestrained political discourse is saying about Muslims, refugees, immigrants. We're all lumped into one kind of generalized mess.
Now, we know that Merkel is taking part in a rally in Berlin today, organised by Muslims to remember those that died in the Paris attack. Her message here is clear. Will it have an impact about what you've just mentioned on the current surge of the supporters of Pegida, but also the media itself?
Well, of course, it's very welcome that she's actually taking part in this, and certainly also that last week, before these attacks, we already had the rise of Pegida and what was happening in Germany, that she'd actually condemned those marches. Having said that, as many of my colleagues and friends in Germany have reflected, it's really a little bit too little, way too late. You know, the problems that have caused the rise of Pegida have come from the mainstream. This is not just about some crazy neo-Nazis rallying and kind of getting people whipped up into a frenzy. I'm sure a lot of the people on Pegida marches don't think of themselves as far-right extremists or Nazis. They actually would say this has nothing to do with us. They feel that they're actually pursuing what has become a mainstream agenda. So yes, Angela Merkel, well done for saying this now, but it has to be more than just these symbolic gestures. There has to be a systematic unraveling in the public sphere and in the political spheres particularly of all the problems that all the demonization has caused thus far.
Now, we know that these Pegida marches started mainly because of asylum centres being made in Germany, and we know that there is a fear that poorer immigrants coming into the country and having a lower wage may be a threat to German natives. Now, is this something that you think the German government has to address itself?
German government has to start putting out proper information. These are kind of fear tactics that a lot of governments across Europe and westernized settings are using to scapegoat vulnerable and marginalized communities for all the problems that are going on. Don't forget we're in a age of extreme austerity, albeit that Germany is a bit cushioned from that. At least, the kind of affluent Western German side of it is cushioned from that more than those of us, for example, in the UK are. But ultimately, these things about there being asylum seeker centres provoking these are just kind of distraction from real problems here. Opening an asylum seeker centre is not a danger to anybody's society. If anything, it's a reflection of a good, tolerant, cohesive society. And we need to be understanding why it is that such ridiculous things can be flagged up as a problem.
Now, we know that the finance minister has said that Germany does need immigrants coming into the country. So on what you're mentioning, we know that the German economy also as well needs migration. How can this be implemented, as you mentioned, on that level so that the natives at large understand the necessity for this influx in their country?
Again, it boils down to the institutions and particularly the government not to be involved in making these kind of lazy and sometimes deliberately malicious claims about immigrant communities. But, let's not beat around the bush here. Muslims in Germany have been here for several generations now. They're also native. They are part of Germany. We can't be continuously talking about them, as often happens in countries like Germany, as still being foreign. And this is part of the key problem here, the fact that you've got generations of people born and brought up in Germany, speaking German better than most people, being completely adapted to society, and yet still being marginalized and being called all sorts of names and being seen as a problem when actually, they're as ready to contribute to society as most generous people are.
Arzu, co-founder of the Islamic Human Rights Commission, thank you very much for joining us today.